Hey guys, thank you so much for coming to watch another Wellness Wednesday. Today I'm talking to Gemma about all things menopause related. Thank you for coming to chat to us, Gemma.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Oh, no problem. So I first met you a few weeks ago when we had when I was invited to a menopause talk, which was super interesting. Gemma was one of the speakers there, and it just struck me how little we all knew about the subject. It was really scary. So I thought it would be great to do something like this to talk about all the things that we should know, but we don't, especially as most of my core clientele's age range is us and above. I thought it'd be really good to get the message out. So thank you, first of all, so much for coming on.
You're welcome.
And could we start by you letting us know a bit about your story? So you've learned
Mm.
so much and researched so much. Unfortunately, you've had to through your own journey.
Mm.
But how do you know so much about this subject?
Well, as you say, it's all been brought to my attention through my own journey. To summarise, which is quite difficult, but they think now retrospectively that I probably began my perimenopausal journey when I was around 27 years old. So obviously that is quite young for what we're used to understanding that the menopause age bracket is. Um, So I had symptoms. I'm 41 now. I actually realized that I was in perimenopause at around 39. So that was 12 really long years of trying to figure it all out. I had symptoms which now, during this time when we're having so much information sharing, are quite obviously perimenopause, but at the time they weren't. So I had reoccurrent UTIs. I had an awful lot of genital urinary issues. I had extreme fatigue. I had eventually it all developed into brain fog. I dealt with depression and anxiety. I didn't have your big names. I didn't have hot flushes, and I didn't have any issues with my periods. So over this
Wow.
12-year period, I was going to all kinds of people. I was told that I had all different sorts of things wrong with me. I was put on different medications and things. So at first, I was put on a lot of antifungal medications because I would be repeated thrush and then followed with cystitis. And that cycle was just perpetual for all the time.
Wow.
So I was put on sort of long-term antifungal medicines, which, knowing what I know now, I would never have put that into my body. But I was also on really long-term antibiotics. I was kind of micro-dosing, if you will, of antibiotics to try
Wow.
and break this cycle. I was put on antidepressants. I still believe that I probably did need them because there's a really fine line between whether it's a menopause symptom and whether or not it's a causation, like the
Yeah.
situation
It's
I
so
was in.
hard, isn't it?
Yeah, so what else did I have? I'm trying to think. All sorts of different blood tests. I went to see gynecologists. I went to see a hormone specialist because I had like a real inner, sense of this feels like a hormonal problem, and I'm quite good at listening to my body, but I was coming up blank every time, and I would hear the same story over and over again, like, oh, this might be a little bit different and this might be a little bit out, but really we can't find anything wrong with you. And that was just the repeated, we don't know what's wrong with you, there's nothing wrong with you, it's
Wow.
just this, it's just that. And that itself can take a toll on your mental health.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, over time, as I say, I was on antidepressants. I actually lost my job. I was made redundant. But
Mm.
these things, having long term sick, and I wasn't performing well at work. I know I wasn't. I wasn't
Yeah.
myself. I couldn't think straight. I always thought that the extreme fatigue came from having young children. I just thought,
Mm.
as we all do, oh, this must be how it feels. This must be why I'm so tired all the time. You always see mums saying that they're tired and things, but I was sleeping like every day. I was having naps in the afternoon every single day as a young woman. Like in my late 20s, and that now obviously wasn't right. I didn't have the correct kind of energy levels. I was dealing with extreme fatigue.
Yeah.
So as it began to get worse and worse and worse, and I was having it makes me feel so funny talking about it. But, I was having cystitis every don't know, 4 weeks or so. You know, it was
Gosh.
kind of standard. I could feel the things that would start, or what would make it happen, or the triggers that I had and stuff like that. And it would scare me, you know, and it made me
Mm.
kind of not want to do certain things, not want to drink or go out with my friends or wear certain clothes and all that kind of stuff. So it was really becoming quite impacting. I decided to watch something that I will be forever grateful for. I was on Instagram and I saw that Caroline Hirons, my very favourite skincare guru, was speaking to Davina McCall. I thought, oh, they're talking about menopause. You know, I don't know. I don't know nothing about it. I might as well just watch it. And thank goodness I did. Because as I listened to Davina talking about symptoms that weren't hot flushes and that weren't period issues, I suddenly had that light bulb moment and I went, oh my gosh, this is what's wrong with me. You know, and
Wow.
even now, I hate saying that. There's nothing wrong with me. It's a natural situation, you know, but I had finally hit the nail on the head and it was a real massive turning point for me. I then went to Newson Health. People may or may not be familiar with Louise Newson. She is the lead menopause specialist across all sorts of different areas, and you know she's helping even government do certain things, I think, as well. So yeah, I went to her clinic, had to pay privately, not because I don't trust the NHS, but because of my situation. I had been through so many different
Yeah.
avenues, so many different waiting lists, that now that I had this information and I was armed with it, I wanted to run with it. So
Mm.
I did what I needed to do. I ended up on HRT, which I am forever grateful for, although I do realise that's not everybody's path. But yeah, then I really started to get to work. So I needed to understand what was happening to me. And I was furious that I didn't know. You know, where
Mm.
was the education? Why did I not know this as a young woman, as a teenager? You know, we get
At your
taught.
own body, yeah.
Exactly. Taught about periods, taught about pregnancy, even taught about how to avoid pregnancy, you know, all of these things. But I was never taught about what was going to happen at the other end. And I was just absolutely furious that this information wasn't available for someone like me. I am a self-confessed geek. I love reading everything. I love anything to do with the anatomy, physiology, biology, you know. So I had already done as much research as I possibly could and never found a mention of perimenopause. So it was became a sort of a real point for me to educate myself as much as I could. And at that time, Davina was spreading her message. So all of a
Mm.
sudden, as I went to look, I found lots and lots and lots of information, which
Mm.
eventually became too much. And I
Mm.
think that's kind of where we're resting now, is that there is a huge amount of information available. And a lot of the women that I work with or speak to, they either didn't know, or now they can see all of this information and they haven't got a clue how to decipher it. They don't know what point is for them, what point is for their friend, what does this mean, what does that mean? And everyone's up in
Mm.
arms about X, Y, and Z, and should I be? And you know, so that's now where I'm starting to rest, is that we need to help people simplify and break down and understand what's going on.
Yeah. Oh, it's complicated. I mean, I've worked, you know, I've had an interest in health and I've worked in it for years, but I don't understand the menopause. I would never, you know, I'm not a specialist. I can relate to it, being a lady of a certain age and having a lot of clients. But of course, as soon as the questions come, I refer them back to the GPs. And if I'm honest, with the hugest respect to the NHS, they're not specialists either. You know, when we went to the course or the workshop the other week, there was a lovely GP on the line, on the, you know, dialing into the meeting because she wanted to educate herself more. So, you know, I'm in no way blaming them, but this is a very specialist thing that isn't conveyed down. And the symptoms of the menopause are so closely related to many other things. I've sat over too many coffees with friends going, I don't know what's wrong with, not me personally, but my friends saying, this is exactly the same as you know, and 1 minute we'll be talking about gut health, then we'll think vitamin deficiencies, then we're thinking chronic fatigue syndrome, then depression. It feels like we're having all these discussions about all these things because my friends and clients don't know what's wrong, but they're met with dead end after dead end after dead end, and your good self was super early to the party. So of course they've, you know, the professionals you spoke to with their best intentions are going to, they've just shut you down and said it can't be done. Quick question for you, because as I say, I'm not an expert. You took the exact right paths, you spoke to endocrinologists, all the rest of it. How do you think that they missed it? You know, how can that be? You must be so angry that you did everything right.
Yeah, I mean,
sorry to put you on the spot, but I'm just interested.
No, I think understanding the way I do now, that hormonal health is a fluctuating thing. So very much now I will speak to women about, yes, we're looking at the decline of hormones over a period of time. But during that decline, it's not a simple straight line. I mean, nothing ever is it? Nothing is linear. Nothing is very, you know, broken down into pieces. We're going up at some points, down at some points. We'll find an area where certain hormones are level, certain are higher, certain, you know, and it goes all over the place. And that actually is what causes a lot of the problems. The decline itself could be handled by the body. And I mean, if we want to start getting really geeky and into it, our bodies are designed to go through this process. And actually, the adrenals can help us in making a replacement. So when the I'm going to get really complicated now. When the ovaries stop making estrogen, which is one of our big hormones, one of the big female hormones, when they've stopped making estrogen, then the adrenals are actually meant to step in and make you a substitute. And then we can sort of slip into post-menopause and it should all be good and well. But modern day woman, their adrenal system is busy. Their adrenal system is already busy working on cortisol, adrenaline, all of these different hormones that the body is trying to use to fight and combat stress, sleepless nights, and, you know, trying to run a business, run a family, run a household, you know, all of those kind of stereotypes. But, you know, there's actually a symptom, you know, that we call rushing women syndrome. So, you know, we're all guilty of it, whether we realize or not. And you can quite often say to a woman, how much stress have you got in your life? And they'll go, oh, no, I'm all right. I'm good. I'm not stressed. And they're either one, covering it up incredibly well, which most of us are, two, haven't even realized because they think that this is what life is meant to be like, that they don't realize that they're stressed. Or three, you can go to them, okay, so how busy are you? Oh my God, I'm so busy. So busy. You know, and you know, you don't really equate the stress that our bodies are going through with how much we're making it do. You know, mental fatigue, physical fatigue, all of these things are working hard on the adrenals. So to come back to your question, my body on that day that I must have had the blood test was all right. You know, that my hormones were as they should be. And there is quite often
small
a medical range.
Snapshot in time. Yeah.
And they can be. And we're going through a decline over a period of time, as I say. So maybe at that point, I was all right. And there are usually, I think the same is for thyroid. I was having a conversation with the doctor the other day, and the same for vitamins. I think you might find as well in the body, in the NHS or wherever you have these tests, there's a lower limit and an upper limit. So if you're somewhere between that in your test that day, you're all good. But if you're down, right near that bottom one, a doctor could still go to you, you're all good. But it's because you're within that limit. But for each individual woman or person or whatever, that could be the low for them. That's not like sitting within a range that somebody has decided somewhere. For them, that could be low for them as an individual. So as much as that doctor said to me I was all right, there's nothing wrong with me, who knows? I'd love to see those results now.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's I'm so glad that Davina did that thing, because it has really raised the awareness and that kind of thing. And so many people, as I say, I don't pretend to be an expert, you're, you know, far more about this than me, but so many people now I'm having conversations with, and I'm actually thinking, you need to be referred on here. This is starting to become a hormonal thing. So something that I learned more recently is the timeline of menopause. You'll be better to describe this than me, but people talk about the menopause as the 10 years. That is not the menopause, is it? That's perimenopause. So fill us in on, you know, what exactly that small bracket is of the menopause that
Mm.
you taught me about recently.
Yeah, I mean, so it actually ends up becoming like a terminology or a language thing. So yes, we are working through hormonal change just as much as puberty. You know, we see a range of time that a child will go through puberty, go from a child into a teenager or whatever, and we'll see that happen over a period of time. It's different for each kid. It's the same for us as we come out at the other end. So some women, like myself, I can start at 27. I'm not actually classed as menopausal. I'm not actually classed as prematurely menopausal because I would still have periods. I do still have a cycle. So I haven't actually finished. I'm just doing it over a really long period of time. But what we have is we'll go into the beginning of this cycle. We'll start to feel, well, it's not a cycle because it doesn't come back around. You go through this process.
Yes.
At the beginning, you could start to feel a few symptoms, a little bit, maybe one or two. Some women, that's all they'll have, you know, and then they'll go through it and they'll start to realize that their periods are stopping. And that can be one of the first symptoms, or that can be one of the last symptoms. And that can go over a few years, or it can go over, well, for me, we're up to 12, so 14, you know, so, and I'm still there. But for some, it can go into across 2 decades, you know, it's how long is a piece of string for each woman.
Yeah.
That time, whilst you're still having a period, whether it's sort of regular or not, is classed as perimenopause, so before menopause.
Yes.
So that whole period of time, which is what usually people are referring to,
Yeah.
when your periods stop for a consecutive 12 months, you haven't had one for 12 whole months, that day, the very following day after the 12-month cutoff, is menopause. That one day. That's when
Yes.
the terminology or the
It's
way that it's written
interesting.
in the books, you know, like that is it. So that's the day that is the menopause. And then after that, you're classed as post-menopausal, so after the menopause. And, you know, a lot
Mm.
of women don't realize that we do still carry a few symptoms along with us. Maybe your body
Mm.
doesn't really appreciate suddenly having that very low amount of hormones in there. And, you know, there can sort of be some quite typical post-menopausal symptoms that people come back and report that they're still suffering with. And now we're looking at, with our life expectancy, that we'll be in that post-menopausal section for around a third of our lives. So it's really important, you
Yeah.
know, that we get a hold of how we feel, and that quality of life is the top of the priority there.
Yeah. Oh, it's interesting. Yeah. Something that a lot of people potentially misunderstand about the menopause, that perimenopause is a lot longer than what you might expect. Menopause is just that small part at the end. Um, So recognizing the symptoms.
Mm.
So we all know about hot flushes. In fact, I can notice my face in the bottom right there is looking particularly red today. There may be a steward's inquiry as to the temperature of this room, or if it's just me, who knows? But we know about some of the more, obvious ones. But I want to ask you about the obvious ones and the little known ones, because when you did your presentation that I watched, there was a few things there that I didn't know about. So fill us
Mm.
in, Gemma. What should we be looking for?
Oh, well, before anything, you know, it's really important to say that both of you and I are not medical people. We're not doctors. It's really important that that is put across to women, because I've heard some terrible stories where someone will say, oh, I thought that this was just menopause, so I just, you know, I left it and I took some vitamins, and actually they had a serious problem with their body that was outside of this hormonal issue. So women should always be getting checked out by a doctor if they don't feel themselves or they don't feel right for any reason, for any symptom. When you start to think about menopause is when you've got a collection of different symptoms, or when something is becoming really impacting on your day-to-day life and you've got no answer. So you've had a blood test, you've had a scan, you've had whatever it is that a doctor refers you to have, and it's coming back as blank. So that's when we can go, okay,
Mm.
so it's not X, it's not Y, it's not Z, it must be hormonal. Perhaps it's perimenopause. So we're looking at things like, for me personally, it was, as I say, repeated urinary tract infections. It wasn't just a
Mm.
one-off, or, you know, unfortunately we were all privy to those occasionally for different reasons, but this was a regular, it was happening all the time. The same for thrush and things that are happening in the genital area, purely because the pH balance and the levels and everything can change in that area, and as we know, it's quite delicate, and it can, any change can really start to impact and make things happen, especially if we are then looking at a decline in estrogen. As estrogen starts to reduce, estrogen is present in almost every cell in a woman's body, so it also works very closely with hydrating each cell. So when we start to talk about things to do with dryness, so for me, as it worked out, my urinary tract infections were due to a lack of estrogen. So the urinary tract itself, the actual tissue in there was lacking hydration, which you would never know. You wouldn't know, you know. So as it was getting thinner and less hydrated, it was getting microscopic tears in that tissue. So bacteria could just sit and live there. So no matter what you did, if that hydration wasn't there, if those tears were there, that damage to that tissue because of the lack of estrogen, I was getting those repeated infections. So then you start to think, okay, so where else, what other cells would be lacking hydration? So you could be thinking about skin. People can suddenly develop dry skin, or they can develop issues with the skin, eczema, psoriasis, things like that. Same for hair, same for nails. Some women even get dry eye syndrome, so you can get really gritty dry eyes and they don't know what that's all about. So that's a strange one. You put that one down to it. What else can we think about in terms of physical? Obviously hot flushes is really well known, but so are cold flashes. So suddenly it's this idea that inside the body, the estrogen is impacting the way that our thermoregulatory system speaks to the brain. So all of these messages going back and forth are impacted by the way that estrogen is in the body. So it can either make you suddenly feel very, very hot, and it feels like a heat from deep within you is suddenly expanding across the body, up the face. It can make you go very red, really hot and sweaty. But the same can happen for cold. You can suddenly get this very, very bitter cold feeling, like it's coming from inside, like you can't warm. You know, when people say, oh, I felt the cold in my bones, you know, that kind of feeling. So cold is also there. Oh gosh, there's so many, it's really difficult to pinpoint. What one was you most surprised to see when you saw the list?
God, I can't even remember now. But like you said on the slides, actually, I wish I'd printed them off. There was just so many things that I think we would put down to a woman in her 40s or 50s, busy life. So, you know, most of us at this point in life have got, if we're lucky enough, we'll still have parents around. If we're lucky enough, we may have children around. And we are at a point where we're torn in both directions. We're most probably working. So a lot of things we notice changes within our body, within our cycle, within our mood. They're so easily pointed to other things. But when you start actually looking at all of it together, like no doubt you saw on the Davina thing, you start to think, hang on a minute, this could well be all part of the same problem rather than individual issues. You know, sleep, for example, I didn't realize that it can affect sleep. No idea. So you made a good point. Why don't we know this?
Yeah, absolutely.
Only just learning this.
So obviously there's lots and lots of physical sides, and then things like sleep cross over into a more of a mental state as well. So obviously when we start to think about insomnia or things like that, or extreme fatigue, you know, then you start to slip over into a more mental side of things. And again, there's a range of different things that you can feel. So we often talk about, you know, PMT symptoms, so like almost anger, and there is such a thing as being as coined as meno rage, where you suddenly, and I've done it, and you know, it is funny, but when you really think about it, it is quite disconcerting. I have done it. I have experienced that kind of rage side of me, and I didn't recognize myself. And I'm very careful when I do speak to women about it to you know, to honor that and to go, it's scary, isn't it? You know, and it's quite hard to sort of go, oh my gosh, who was that just said that? Who, like, where did that come from? It comes out of nowhere, just like a hot flash or hot flush. It comes out of nowhere, and you step back into yourself again and think, where did that come from? And it can be very, very disconcerting, very unbalancing, and then you can come into the realms of anxiety. And you know, we can think of anxiety in so many different ways. I've spoken to women who no longer want to drive very far because they've got an awful lot of anxiety around driving or being on the road. You speak to women who go, well, I used to do this all the time. I used to do this all the time, and now suddenly I can't. And that it just comes out of nowhere. Women who were bold and strong and confident and things suddenly just can't even bring themselves to stand up in a meeting. And this is where we start to go, okay, so physical impacting is bad. It's not good. It's not something anyone should put up with. But then when you're trying to provide for your family, or you're trying to further a career, and you can't stand up in a meeting and get your words out of your mouth, because one, you've got no confidence, two, you're super anxious, three, you cannot get those words to come from your brain and into your mouth. Brain fog.
Brain fog.
The worst. It's out of all of those symptoms I had, I think brain fog was the worst, because I knew I was in there. I knew that Gemma, who has read all this stuff and who knows this stuff, I mean, I'm a yoga teacher, as you know, I could stand at the top of a class and teach 50 people, but sometimes I stood there and I could not remember what I was supposed to say, and you just go, this is crazy. Where has it gone? She's in there, she knows what to do, but she just can't get it out of my mouth. And that really knocked my confidence. And over time that does start to manifest into other things, and how you feel talking to your friends or your family, or in your workplace. So they are really big issues. And again, they're ones that we just sort of go, oh, either everyone's feeling a bit like that, or well, oh, I just have to put up with it, this is just life because I'm busy, everyone's relying on me.
Yeah, it's almost like having a personality transplant. And we talk about women being educated, guys as well. Certainly a lot of my contemporaries and friends and things, I know their husbands are struggling, because they're like, what's happened to my wife? Where's the fun lady gone? Why is everything difficult? Why does she hate me now? Why does my breathing annoy her? And so it's the whole household is affected by this. It's not just the women. I can remember my mum going through the menopause and smashing up a water filter or something, and such a placid lady, and we all remember where we were when she lost her temper, things like that. And now I look back and I'm like, I get that now. At the time I just thought, wow.
Yeah, and I think it can be quite disconcerting. I know it certainly was for my husband. In terms of my physical side of things, he was at his wit's end. He was like, oh goodness, what are we going to do? Like, we tried everything. He didn't want to see me suffering. But when it came to the emotional side, whether it was I was being ragey that day, or if I was super anxious, or if I was crying, or whatever, it was that there was no pattern. There was no rhyme or reason for any of these things. And he would go from saying, you were fine yesterday, like, you were you yesterday. Yeah. So what's happened today? And I think, that's hard for us dealing with it, but of course it's hard for your family and your spouse at the same time, because they just don't know. They start treading on eggshells, and that's not nice for anybody involved. So it is, as you say, it impacts wider, and understanding and appreciating is the first step to being able to support someone, which is what I've found is when people come and speak to me and I say these things and they go, oh, I'm so glad you've said that. It's not just me. So it's
yeah, absolutely. So how can we prepare? Because clearly the information is not forthcoming. So how might we educate ourselves to know what's around the corner?
There is a lot coming, and there is a lot in the pipeline. There's so many people doing a lot of work everywhere. I've been at Parliament and rallied and everything when we got the NHS prepayment certificate done. So there's things happening all the time, and people in high places that are making these changes. And I think one of them coming soon is going to be education for young girls, so it's sort of teenage time, which I think is really, really important. But in the meantime, as you know, my offering or my Instagram and everything that I do comes under the banner of ageless menopause information. So that was obviously important for me with my own story, especially when I didn't see myself reflected back in a lot of the research that I was doing. It was always older than me women, or it often showed, grey haired and things, like showing a much, much older woman than me. And I thought, why does my face not fit here? What's going on? But I think you'll find that is changing now as well. And when it comes to before any of this, so completely pre any kind of perimenopause, it's about knowing your normal. It's about knowing what is right for you as an individual. And as we already briefly touched on, there is a lot of information being fed out there, whether it's being fed through social media, or through the television, or, you know, just wherever you go, there's somebody talking about it. In some ways, that's amazing, but in other ways, that's making us go, hold on a minute, that's not happening to me, but that is happening to me, and that's not right, but this is. And, you know, like, so it's kind of making us second guess ourselves. But my message to every woman that I meet is to know you, and their story, their body, their experience is going to be completely different from anybody else's. So in those pre-menopause years, know your cycle, learn your body and what it does, how it reacts, how it responds. All of us have got a cycle of some sort, where some people obviously have struggled with theirs for whatever reason, but the majority of us will have a cycle that, if we monitor, which is one of my real big things, is to monitor your cycle, whether that's on an app, or for me, I'm a pen and paper person, or just write something down every day, and you can start to see that we do have some recognizable things happening routinely. So if you start to see that before menopause, and you understand that, you know, this time of the month I'm going to feel like this time of the month I'm better at that, this time of the month I want to go out and see everyone, whereas that time of the month I want to be left alone, you know, like, it's all of these kind of, and that's very, very, very normal when we start to understand that these hormones play a certain part, play a certain role, and are really, really intrinsically linked to us as humans, you know, like way back. And things like, did I say, I don't know if you've heard me say this, it's probably in a more yoga setting, but when women come together, for example, when women come together in a circle, we all sit together, our bodies produce a hormone called oxytocin, which is a happy hormone. So, I mean, even down to that tiny little minute detail of when we sit in a circle as women, we go, well, what good is that? What does that do? We go back to times long gone, like cave women or whatever, they would sit together to stay safe. You know, so if, as we know, men were termed as hunter-gatherers or whatever, they would be out, and we know history shows us that women would nurture and care and be together at home, cave, whatever you want to call it. So when we sit together, we're designed to give ourselves a nice little hit of feel good, because that's where we were supposed to be. So if our bodies can do that with one hormone, imagine what it does with all the rest. So,
well, that's why our cycles sync, I think, isn't it? If you get groups of females in an office or working in close proximity, you find that you all end up syncing.
Yeah.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that hormone is the only other time that's released is when you give birth, and that loving feeling you have with your baby and things. So
yeah,
a magical thing to have.
Yeah. So it's insane. So if you understand that that's happening, and you can monitor that, and you can know what's normal for you, then you're going to be in a much better position to notice when something changes, and when something is a little bit not quite as it usually is, because you'll have this kind of back catalogue of how you were before. And then when the changes start to occur, again, monitoring those is very important, so that you can start to see, is this a one-off, or is this something that's happening all the time? Is this getting worse? And, you know, are you adding to symptoms? Like, all of these different things. It's just amazing to have that information and know yourself. We've got all sorts of cliched self-care and do this and do that, you know, but actually the importance of listening to your body is the ultimate self-care. So that's the best place to start for me.
So making notes, recognizing what's normal for you, and at least then, even if you don't understand what to do with that information, when you do go and see your GP, or I've got to be honest, I'm a huge fan, if you've got the means to do it, private GP for these things, because, as I say, I'm not throwing any shade on the NHS, but they're, you know, your 6 minutes is not going to cut it in a consultation. So I can certainly recommend sending you to the right place. But at least when you have your appointment, whether it be private GP, NHS, whatever it might be, you are armed with knowledge, and rather than just saying I've been wasting your time waffling, you're actually coming in with facts and figures of what's happening. Have you picked up along your research ways to manage these things? I mean, obviously you're a yoga teacher, so I'm sure that's going to be something that you'd recommend. But how can we help ourselves?
There's so many ways, and obviously the very first thing people will talk to you about is hormone replacement therapy, and I am an advocate for it for myself and how it's worked for me, but I have seen people that it does not work for, people that can't take it for whatever reason. So obviously there has to be other ways, and there really are. And what I do tend to say to people is, even if you are on HRT, it is very, very important that we address lifestyle changes, because HRT can bring the level up, but it cannot, unless you're going to have a blood test every few hours, to address the fluctuations. So as we talked about earlier, the hormones can be up or down or in the middle or wherever on different days. You know, sometimes hourly they reckon that we can change the makeup of our hormone structure. So you need to be able to keep those fluctuations as minimal as possible, and that can only be done with lifestyle choices, so lifestyle changes. For me, there are so many, but for me, one of the biggest ones right now is to reduce stress. As we mentioned earlier about the adrenals, and that they can help you. They can make a type of estrogen that will help the body sort of go through. But if they are busy making adrenaline and cortisol, they just won't do it for you. So they've got a pecking order. And when we think about adrenaline and cortisol, especially adrenaline, and what it does for us is that fight or flight, is keep you safe. Of course, the adrenals are going to have that first. But in a situation where we're running away from a tiger, that's amazing. But nowadays, that's not what it looks like. A tiger can be a full inbox, or a tiger can be your children stressing you out, or can be whatever, you know. So all of these things that are continuous means that we are continuously asking the adrenal system to make cortisol and adrenaline. So we're not helping ourselves in that sense. So if we're going to stick on that one, obviously there are lots. Staying with de-stressing and calming down, for me, it goes hand in hand with moving the body. So having, you know, it doesn't have to be extreme. I don't like to say exercise, because some people, that completely switches them off. You say exercise, they don't want to know. And I get that. I'm a yoga teacher and I don't like exercising. It's really strange. It's because my version of exercise is getting hot and sweaty and out of breath, and you know, and that's what people think. You know, everyone's got their own definition of what that means, but I don't enjoy getting hot and sweaty and out of breath and things like that. So I enjoy walking, or I enjoy a yoga session or a Pilates session, or you know, there's all sorts of different ways. But when we calm everything down, the central nervous system is what we're focusing on. So it doesn't have to be a physical thing. Yes, that will help you if we were talking about it under a different heading. But for me, when we're talking about keeping calm, we're not looking at the body, we're looking at the central nervous system. And if exercise means that you're stressed and, oh my God, this is just too much for me, I'm out of breath, then that's not going to help you at this time. When you're calm and you can get that central nervous system to listen in and go into parasympathetic, and we're all nice and relaxed and the muscles let go, and suddenly the adrenal system goes, oh, hang on a minute, I can make you a little bit of that extra estrogen. You know, so it's that part. Obviously for me it's yoga, because I am a yoga teacher, and actually that's how I found yoga, is because I was made redundant. I went into a bout of quite severe depression and anxiety. And then the only thing that was getting me up and out of bed, aside from my husband going, please, Jim, was to go to the gym and go to a yoga class. I'd initially gone because I wanted to swim. And another really nice, you know, physical movement, and the water is very soothing. But in that time, in that state, I didn't want to go get undressed, get wet, get out, get dry, deal with wet stuff, you know. So I'd go to the gym and look at the pool that way, or the yoga class that way, and I thought, oh, I'll just go in there. And actually it was the best thing I could have done, which it calmed me down. It stretched out my body. My central nervous system had to focus on the movement, not what was going round and round in my head. It grounded me, and then it just, you know, it changed everything for me.
Fantastic. You made an interesting point about not everyone liking exercise. So at school, I was crap at PE. I was awful at any kind of team sport, awful at pretty much any physical thing. However, when I needed to lose a shed load of weight some years ago, I discovered the gym. And as you'll probably guess, I'm going to suggest weight training is also worth considering, because same kind of vibe. If you think that you hate exercise, anyone can be good at lifting weights. It doesn't matter what anyone else is doing around you. I really like the sense of you being better than you were last week, about freeing the brain and just going through the physical motions. So weight training, very, very good for, as we get older, not necessarily menopause related, but reducing the risk of osteoporosis and all of that kind of thing. Very, very good. So there is something for everyone, whether you want to walk, dance, yoga, weight train. You don't have to be out there running laps of the estate if you want to have exercise in there.
Right, and you
There's
say,
been
you know,
some
sorry,
go on.
just to say osteoporosis is linked to menopause as well. So
Ah,
the lack of estrogen in the body can actually also impact bone density. So the way that the cells
there
in the
we go.
bones behave. Yeah. So in yoga, we talk about that in terms of progressively loading and pushing and, you know, having your weight on your hands sometimes and things like that. But absolutely weight training. That's why we're seeing such an influx now of women in their
Mm,
midlife. I hate talking about, you know, ages and things like that, but we see people at this stage of life suddenly, as you
yeah.
say, swapping that, you know, killing themselves in the gym for lifting weights and becoming stronger. And
Mm,
we get this idea that, oh, but I don't want to get bulky and muscly and all that kind of thing. But that's not what we're working into. We're working
no.
into a different type of strength. We're working on bone health. We're working on
Mm,
cardiovascular health, you know, because again,
mm,
that's impacted when we talk about the tissues in the body and the muscles in the body being impacted by estrogen. Well, the heart is a giant muscle. So that too
yeah.
is really important that we start to take care of our cardiovascular health. So as you say,
Mm,
weight training I think is wonderful, and people like yourself who are showing us how to do it safely and, you know, getting us comfortable in that environment is so important.
mm,
But you know, it
mm.
comes in so many stages, and as I've said, we're already, it's about the individual woman, because you could have a woman come to you, maybe she's got a little bit of rage, you know, and she might go, give me them weights, you know, and she'll get in there and she wants to know about it. But if you could get a woman who comes to you and she's got a lot of anxiety, then you might be going, do
Yeah,
you know what, I think you need to go and see Jem first, or go and, you know, calm it all
100%.
down and come back and see me and we'll work together then. And you know, there's so many
Mm,
different nuances to it all, that there are no sweeping answers. And I think that's what I am really starting to focus on now, is that people are coming to me
mm.
with the, what should I take, what should I do, where should I go, you know. You have to go, well, let's talk about you.
Individual.
Yeah.
Yeah. Things that I think are that can be applied more generally. And as I say, I don't get involved in the menopause side of things in my remit. But one thing I do know to be true is prioritizing proteins, fat, limiting alcohol. And there have been some evidence to suggest limiting dairy as well, because it's quite
Mm.
inflammatory. Those things can be applied. You can also look into research about, you know, the good fats like seed cycling and things like that.
Mm.
Again, I don't pretend to be an expert on that, but there are other ways that you can look into. I'm mindful of the fact that I could probably talk about this all day, but there are lots and lots of things. So I've got a few things to ask you still, but what I would say while I think about it is, if you want to reach out for any kind of help, I'll link all of your Instagram, your various contact details on here, because there's going to be lots of people that are like, that's me, what do I do now, kind
Yeah.
of thing. So you
Yeah.
can kind of steer them. So I'll put all of those on there. What would you suggest? What did you do first, when obviously everything's, you had that light bulb moment, you're like, this, I just think I'm onto something here? What did you do? What would you suggest others do as well? Obviously they'll contact you, but is there a kind of path? Where do we turn? What do we do?
Um, so again, this is where it can depend on where you are yourself. But you know, if you are in a situation, which I've met a lot of women who have come and said, I can't get a doctor's appointment, or who have come and
Mm,
said, I don't know if this what's wrong with me, or you know, I'm not sure, or whatever. So you know, people like yourself as a personal trainer or as a coach, or as you know, in all the different capacities that you have. And the same for me as well. I do provide a kind of one-to-one. I'm not a coach, but I prefer to say I'm a support facilitator. You know, I'm just here as someone who understands what you're going through, and is ready to help you. And sometimes that can be the
mm,
first step, is finding somebody. It doesn't have to be a doctor, because I think this is where people can get stuck. They can go, oh, I need to see a doctor.
yes.
And you go, well, maybe you can't get an appointment, maybe you haven't got the right information, you know, for saying that it's a menopausal thing, you know. And let's build that, let's figure that out together, let's go through, let's have a chat, let's support you and figuring out what's going on with you. And as I say, that can be you or me or anybody, a
Mm.
friend that you want to talk
So
to about
reach
it
out to
together.
somebody who knows about these things, is what we're
Talk to
saying.
someone. Yeah, I mean, we've got
Yeah.
so many women who are not even coming out of the woodwork, you know, who are just like, nope, I'm not talking about it, I'm not telling anyone about it, I don't want to
Mm,
admit that this is happening to me, I'm scared, you know. So like, it's that very, very first step is to talk. find someone,
Yeah.
get some support. It doesn't matter what it looks like, but you need someone else. You can't do this alone. You know, it's hard.
Yeah.
And then it would be with that idea of monitoring and understanding yourself over a period of time, as long as there isn't something alarming, you know, that you haven't got a symptom that could potentially be leading to something, you know, a little bit more sinister, in which case push and get that doctor's appointment, get the all clear on a bill of health in that sense. But otherwise, we'll go through, monitor all of these symptoms, figure out what's going on, and in the meantime, start to make a few changes to see if it helps you. So maybe, as you've mentioned, you cut down on alcohol. Maybe you cut down on caffeine. Maybe you start to really look into your sleep cycle, your sleep pattern, and improve on that. There's, you know, all sorts of things. Maybe you look at the way you're eating. Maybe you start to walk around the block every day. You know, like all of these, you just introduce. I'm a big advocate, I'm not sure about you, but for the 1% of change. I think you try and change everything at once, you're just dooming yourself. You know, it's just not a good idea. None of us are designed to do that. But if you start to say, I'm going to drink 2 more glasses of water every day, or 1 less cup of coffee every day. You know, these are things that we can all do. We can all commit to something small. And then as they go over a long period of time, it becomes normal. And then you start on something else. But over that period of time, because I think taking that control back, okay, this might be happening to me and I don't understand why, but I'm going to control this. I'm going to make sure that I know that I'm drinking less alcohol. I know that I'm going to bed at a good time. I know that I'm going for a walk. I know that I'm drinking more water. I know that I'm trying to, you know, eat better. Or, you know, it's that idea that I'm doing something about it. You can also, I guess, start to think about what you're taking in terms of supplementation. I'm quite particular about knowing first. So knowing if you are low in such and such and so, so you can get blood tests done in pharmacies and things, or you can go to a private GP and just have a little look at those baseline D, C, or the Bs, all of that kind of thing. Because I don't think it's a great idea to take loads of stuff if you don't know which one you're looking at. Do you see what I mean? So I know for me it was B12. I didn't have my B12 was on the floor until I knew that. I had to have a blood test to know, and then I started to take B12, and it made a huge difference. But if I'd have taken a multivitamin or something, I wouldn't have known which one it was. So I'm quite an advocate for knowing. But in the meantime, between that time of getting a doctor's appointment and feeling terrible, there's a lot that you can do. There are little bits at a time to help yourself. But then, yes, go and see a doctor. Show them your research. Give them all the information, because doctors, they're getting better now in terms of being offered training. But in their original training to become a GP, it wasn't covered, or it was very, very minor what was told. So having some compassion for the fact that they don't know either, and that you're working on this together, you know, I think that's important too. And then maybe they'll talk to you about hormone replacement therapy, and I know a lot of people are scared of that. How was that experience for you? Do you know many people that have said no? Or
I can remember not so much this generation, but as in I think I'm older than you, but certainly in my 40s, you know, not so much my age, but definitely, but you know, my mum's age, were terrified they were all going to get breast cancer if they had HRT, because of some study that was years ago. So I think things are getting better there, but there is still quite a resistance there. That it's natural, we should be able to cope with it and all the rest of it. So yeah, this is 3 phases really, isn't it? Know you're normal, make notes, try the natural steps you can take to support your body through it as well, you know, prioritizing protein, fat, sleep, stress, water, all of those kind of things. Then have a look at it. If you are struggling, talk to someone, seek help, second opinions. I'll put links on this video, because it doesn't need to be the 10-15 years of hell that you have had to fight God knows how much money and time you spent on this process to get to
Yeah.
where you are now. And you're one of the lucky ones. You know, you've actually, by chance, stumbled across this information. If you hadn't, you'd still be, you know, scrabbling around now, wondering why you don't feel well, why this, why that. And it's really frustrating. It's the whole reason I wanted to have you on, really, just to raise awareness of these things. If one person watches this and they take action, which is the key word, then it's all good, isn't it?
Absolutely.
I'm hoping to tag along to your workshop in January, which I think is the 19th. So if anyone's in the Braintree area and wants to know a little bit more detail, because you know, with these sort of chat formats, there's so much to try and get through in an hour or so. So hopefully we can do it, or you'll do an evening. I'll tag along because I'm interested in it. And health and whatnot. I'll make sure I share that on all my socials when that workshop's going to be and things. So anything else you wanted to add, Gemma? Because I know, you know, we've merely scratched the surface of this big topic.
Exactly. And, you know, like you said, we could talk for hours and we could go over all of the many different scenarios. But I think the most important messages to get out to women is that this is happening to us all in one way or another. So we need to talk to each other. We need to get support. And probably the most important thing, and the thing I say the most over and over again, is that you do not have to suffer. There is always a way to make yourself feel better. I can't promise that you're going to feel $1 million, you know, but you're certainly going to feel better than you do right now. So it's a process, and we're juggling as we go. I mean, I have bad days and good days, and I must say though, I haven't had a UTI in nearly 3 years. So no, 2.5 years. Yeah, 2.5 years. So for me, that's huge. So even if it's just that, you know, I'm happy with that. So there is always improvement that you can make. And so try and help yourself.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, and you know, giving up your time and all the rest of it for free with the sole purpose of helping other people. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Links to follow. Thank you so much, Gemma.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. Catch you soon. Bye.